So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, it's always important understanding sections of the restoration period, not only of the tabernacling, but also from trade. And obviously, the information is instantly sent throughout the world. And there is a section related with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where the United States unfortunately failed. And it's already showing obviously signs of what Daniel the prophet had mentioned regarding then the weakening of the system in the 21st chapter. We find then sections of Yeshayahu, we find then other sections of Yirmiyahu, other sections of Ezekiel, and then Daniel the prophet was very specific when he said system. That was then obviously the Hebrew word then used in the translation is despised, but he's not talking about a despised system as a person being despised. It's simply explaining a system that was weakened. Daniel the prophet, he was obviously a minister of finances, and he had a very strong hold on trade of the time, and he was able to understand very simply and very easily partnerships and credit, line of credit. Those situations were widely used during the time of Daniel, and this was roughly 500 years before the coming of the Hamashiach ben Yosef. And because of these many aspects, China then is leading the system, and the BRICS system, they want to launch their own equipment and space for their own use. And this truly indicates the exclusivity of these group and shows the situation related with the system of the West. So then, in Daniel the 11th chapter, we find then a very important understanding related with this system that was then weakened. Later on, then, this system is re-strengthened because of what Yeshayahu had pointed out of the places then beyond the river of Ethiopia, or the rivers of Ethiopia. So then, petroleum is very important. Without petroleum, the engines, they simply don't function. It's a combustion engine, obviously. Now, coltan, columbine tantalite, is as important as petroleum for an engine of a car or a truck. Without the coltan, the electronics industry simply cannot function properly. There are other usages of other materials, but the market has developed a vice for this specific mineral. And the United States is showing quite a few failures related with the understanding of the existing market. So our government unfortunately became very big, and quite honestly, it's not very lean. The government sometimes is very lavished, Their policies, they are not policies of becoming a lean system, but they overgorge themselves in certain areas. In other sections, then they are lacking. So it truly shows a lack of responsibility for the system itself. Our government was not as used to be. They became very bold, yet very uncaring for the condition of the system. So obviously there are many sections of the government related with national security, related with the trade, related with the infrastructuring, and many other sections. But each of these, they must work leanly. So there are sections of the government, they are very abusive. They purposely abuse the system in certain areas, and then other areas they are simply lacking. It truly is a lack of responsibility. So the situation is that there is a certain amount, and if it doesn't use by the end of the fiscal year, then it's lost. This is ridiculous. Because if certain departments, they don't have to use this money, they can go around buying chairs and buying furniture only for the sake of spending. These people are truly scoundrels. They have no regard for the problems of the system. They are only taking advantage of it. So then many departments, they purposely buy things that they should not be buying, only because there is a certain amount given for this specific time. So there are no situations in a country such as this regarding obligating themselves of spending these amount. In many responsible countries, when the system is in crisis, whatsoever expenditure is found not properly justified is considered a crime. United States, unfortunately, during these last decades, they don't have any more this responsibility in themselves. They purposely spend and destroy the system, and they have no regard of what's going on. So then there are many kinds of family involvements in the government, and the security system is not very truly secured. There are many private companies that are doing a far more important work than the government itself. However, the abuses are enormous. So then people must relearn, and the government become more caring for the system itself. When I used to work for the airport, there were many supervisors, managers, they purposely had taken advantage of the system. In a very tiny airport, they were making special operations, and special this, that, and the other. During the time of winter, not very many travelers coming, and sometimes there were more people in uniform than travelers. So truly this shows and reflects on the government and on the president, because it's not only a tradition of giving a certain amount and then during the fiscal year must be spent. That's not very proper. And when I used to work for the department, they used to buy CEO chairs. Those big, huge chairs that, people purchase. And then the government was doing these for regular workers and exchanging furniture simply for the fact of exchanging them. So it reflects truly the lack of responsibility from the president and from the government. It truly does. So only because they have breakfast and lunch benefits, it does not give them the right of wasting the resources. Now the system becomes severely weakened. The TPP, very important in the Pacific. China is absolutely replacing the United States money with their own. Now the exchange in many countries, they have replaced the USD. A lot of our troubles are simply our own politicians not being responsible. And then they blame on security, national security. That has nothing to do with it. The worst bad people are the very members of our government, because they do not come from humble backgrounds. They already were involved very early in life in certain habits that unfortunately amongst the people no longer works. The Vice President of the United States going out in France, spending $500,000 in a single night in a hotel. Does it give us some sort of a confidence? Directors going around, flying around. They have the nerve of saying, they are doing trade, some sort of, whereas they can do these easily via computer, using government's credit cards and lavishing themselves with so many of these niceties, and then the people are paying with their own taxes. And then the government wonders why people are not paying taxes. So during these last 8 years, the government has absolutely abused the system. It's not a fact that they were trying to do the work. There are many reports that the government was very abusive in expenditures. So let's hope then the next president and the next phase of 4 years, can lean up the system, and then being re-elected after 4 years, because the first 4 years are simply adjustments. Quite honestly, the economy is so bad, it no longer takes a couple of years of adjustments and a couple of years of making money. Now it takes double of the time only to adjust the system and then trying to make money on the other 40 years. And granted, our country spent more in these last 8 years than in the entire history of the nation. And then this war in the Middle East, and then people don't understand that they cannot halt the sons of Ishmael in this movement they are doing in Northern Africa. It simply cannot be halted. So the government have no knowledge of the original manuscripts. They don't understand how to read it. And they go around trying to fight a group that cannot be fought with. And then they build a new capital in Mountain View, Arkansas, with 12 gates, think they are building a city of their own. So we find religious aspect mixed up with the government. We find government funding going to personal banking of certain people, buying their own names. This castle in Arkansas is paid with government money, but it was purchased from an ex-CIA agent, and it's a private home. It's registered as a private home. So the government is involved in many kinds of crimes, and as long as there is no justification, they should be brought to court. Only because the amount of money they are spending is abusive. So the government obviously has many aspects of liberty of doing certain actions, but when you observe, having this tradition of must spend in a certain time of the year before September, that's not very wise. And I'm buying furniture, buying new cars, buying new vans. I was driving the other day and found a standard van with an engine of a 450. That's more than a ton. And then, sure enough, abusive was U.S. government's plate. So you have a standard size van that easily could be maximum of 250, a half a ton. It's not even an extended version. It was a standard with a 450 engine. That's more than a ton. You find vice presidents gorging themselves with going out of the country and spending more than they should have. So it's not very responsible. So then TPP, China has already said they are pushing forward and they want to get rid of USD as fast as they can. They only use some other types of wordings so it make it more polished. But the Soviets and the Chinese, they are obviously leading this new period of time. And Obama himself has explained the TPP nations the reasons for the US government's failure and suspensions of its desire of dealing with it. So US again has failed. And there are other opinions stating that TPP is a disaster. And then obviously the more we do this, the more then China becomes involved in the forward motion. So then China believes we should set a new and very practical working plan and then positively respond to the expectations of industry and sustain momentum. That's what was said, the forward motion, and establish a direct trade area in Asia Pacific, obviously.
Verizon Wireless.
So please stay tuned, much more coming up.